good. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to our witnesses for being here. Our witnesses have made the point that the bid protest process can help make the federal contracting process fair and transparent, which is obviously very important. Unfortunately, there's been a large absence of fairness and transparency, especially with the current administration. And I really want to focus in and to talk about what the absence of fairness and transparency would mean for the true funders and true clients of these contracts, which are our constituents and the American people. Professor Eukins, are there examples from outside the United States where businesses lack the ability to challenge government contracting decisions?
Yes, sir. The most profound example was in South Africa under Jacob Zuma, when Jacob Zuma and the Gupta family were able to seize control of actually a small part of the overall procurement system in South Africa, but they delegitimized the entire young democracy in South Africa as a result. A lot of what you see from President Ramaphosa now in his response, his aggressive response against corruption, is because of what they did, what Jacob Zuma and the Gupta family did in procurement. So when a procurement system collapses, it affects the entire government.
What has that meant for the results of those contracts and the people of those countries' return on the investment?
What it's meant is that for South Africa, for example, is now revamping their procurement system dramatically. I think in our own country here, as we're moving forward, I mean, it will be important for there to be, as you say, as much transparency as possible in order to keep. So, a concrete example, and something that I know that's very important to you, is the detention centers that are likely to be forward. The detention centers have been a classic example of private capital being used aggressively by the federal government to put facilities in place. And if those detention facilities are not procured using transparent processes that set standards as to what the detention facility should look like based on the contracts, then there could be very serious ramifications across the government.
Yeah, I'm really happy you brought this up because it's something I wanted to talk about. You know, about a week and a half ago, I did a tour of this, what I would call an internment camp, but it's an immigrant detention center in the middle of the Everglades in the state of Florida, being operated by the Florida Division of Emergency Management, which is tasked with keeping our people safe during a hurricane. And they're spending about $450 million of the $500 million cap that they can spend to prepare for hurricanes on the detention center. So hurricane comes up in the Gulf tomorrow, barreling towards Florida. They have to go back to the legislature and spend time doing that instead of taking care of the people of our state. But that's a whole other thing. I want to talk about the lack of transparency and fairness we're seeing in this because I don't want to see this exported across the country. The most recent example is this Everglades facility. Here's some examples. CDR Health, which has donated about $4 million to Republicans in Florida over $500,000 to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis a few months ago, won a $17.5 million contract for this specific facility. IRG Global, which has given $400,000 to Governor DeSantis and the GOP, including $10,000 to the Florida GOP just hours before they were awarded a $1.1 million contract for this immigrant detention center. They're running the camp operations, and they got another $5 million contract later in a few weeks after that. None of these businesses hired to build, staff, and run this immigrant detention facility have any prior experience with immigrant detention centers and no prior experience with anything in corrections facilities or anything around that. This is costing us 8 to 10 times what it usually costs to house a typical inmate. And I would like to enter into the record unanimous consent this article from the Orlando Sentinel.
Without objection.
Yeah, it's Florida's disaster pipeline funnels millions to politically connected contractors. Look, I mean, and I don't care what party you're in. This is something we should all, and I don't care what your politics are, this is something that should worry all of us. When in the state of Florida, the money set aside to protect us from hurricanes is being used for what I would say is a politically motivated promise in this mass deportation thing. But not even just that, but the money that's being awarded to these contractors is not being done in a transparent way. It's completely bypassing the typical process you go to have a contractor in the state of Florida, and then it's seemingly going to people who've donated millions and millions of dollars to the guy making the decisions. And so this is something that should be on the mind of all people across the country, and every Floridian, especially as we talk about procurement and as we talk about third-party contractors. Thank you, and I yield back.